Tom Hadley spent 38 years as a paramedic, and when he died, his family divided everything he left behind in under a week. His son Derek took control immediately, called a real estate agent the day after the funeral. A woman in a gray blazer walked through the house measuring rooms while Tom's coffee mug was still in the dish rack. Derek kept the truck, kept the savings, $19,000, kept the tools from the garage, and sold them to a pawn shop before his sister even knew they were gone. His wife Sharon picked out the antique hutch and their mother's china. Everything else, not worth renting a truck. And Claire, Tom's daughter, watched her father's entire life get boxed up and carried out the door. The recliner, the kitchen table, the nightstand where he hid a photo of their mother behind his reading glasses. All gone. So what did Claire get? A rusted 1998 ambulance with faded paint and a cracked mirror held on with electrical tape. 3 boxes of old uniforms, and a set of keys to a vehicle she couldn't even afford to tow. Scrap metal on wheels, Derek called it. He dangled the keys like garbage. Junkyard offered $300, but towing costs more than that. Good luck. That was her inheritance, and Claire was in no shape to fight. $212 in the bank, a 1-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner, a landlord leaving notes about late rent, and a nursing license she hadn't touched in 7 months. Why 7 months? Because a 16-year-old boy named Danny Marsh died on her watch. Bright kid. Varsity track runner. Came into the unit cracking jokes about missing practice, still smiling, even as his breathing got tight. Severe asthma attack. His inhaler ran empty. The backup was locked in a cabinet. The nurse with the key stepped out 4 minutes. Danny didn't have 4 minutes. His last words were, "I can't breathe," and he said them looking straight at Claire, like she was the one person in the world who could fix it. She couldn't. She held his hand and felt the grip go slack. After that, she quit. The scrubs went to the back of the closet. The license went into a drawer. And 7 months passed. Now, it was a cold Saturday morning. The ambulance sat in a storage lot on Route 412, dollars a day she didn't have. She drove out with one plan: clean it out, sell it, for scrap, move on. She unlocked the rear doors. The smell hit first antiseptic old vinyl, and underneath something that was simply him. But something was wrong. The ambulance was too clean. Floor swept. Cabinets wiped. Stretcher rail oiled. In the overhead cabinet, a handwritten checklist in her father's shaky writing. Dated 3 weeks before he died. Someone had been caring for this vehicle, right up until the end. Then she looked at the stretcher mount and stopped. Extra brackets. Custom welded steel. Heavy-duty bolts no factory ever installed. A section of floor framed like a door that wasn't supposed to exist. She found the latch painted the same color as the floor. Invisible unless you knew. She worked it with her thumbnail. It resisted. Then click. The floor lifted on a hinge. A steel compartment welded to the chassis, 6 inches deep, rubber-lined. And inside, not thrown in arranged, were objects that would change everything. 3 worn leather journals, over 30 yellowed letters, a bank passbook, legal documents, and, at the very bottom, a white envelope with one word in her father's handwriting. Claire. What was inside would shatter everything she thought she knew. A secret account with $43,000. A building no one knew existed. And a letter that began with 6 words she never expected to read. If this story already has you hooked, subscribe, because it's about to get a lot heavier. Now let's open that envelope. Claire opened the bank passbook first. The account was in her father's name. The first deposit, $300, was made over 20 years ago. After that, deposits came every month. Sometimes 50, sometimes 100, never more than 200. Small amounts, easy to miss, easy to hide. The final entry was made 11 days before Tom died. The balance read $43,217. Claire stared at that number. Her father made $42,000 a year. A county paramedic his entire life. He never talked about savings, never spent big, never once hinted that money like this existed. Derek had already cleaned out the only account the family knew about. But this one had been built in silence, one quiet deposit at a time, for over 20 years. She opened the manila envelope next. Inside, a property deed. A commercial building at 614 Greer Street, Ridgemont. Purchased 9 years ago. Cash, $28,000. Owner listed Thomas R. Hadley. And below that, a handwritten note, held in trust. Ellison and Parker Attorneys. Claire had never heard of Greer Street. Never heard of Ellison and Parker. Her father owned a building, and no one in the family knew it existed. She set the deed down, picked up the white envelope with her name on it, turned it over once. The back was blank. She tore it open. 2 pages, blue ink. Her father's handwriting steady and the early lines looser toward the end, like he started strong and let himself go as the words got harder. "Dear Claire," it began, "if you found this compartment, then I'm gone, and you're sitting in the back of my ambulance wondering what your old man was up to all those years. That's fair. I should have told you. I wanted to. But every time I tried, I couldn't find words that didn't sound foolish or small. So I wrote them down instead, put them here and trusted that you'd be the one to find them." She read the next line and her chest tightened. "I've been using this ambulance on my days off for over 20 years. Tuesdays and Thursdays mostly, sometimes weekends. I drive out to the camps on the county line where the farm workers live. I go under the Route 9 overpass where the folks without homes sleep. I check on Mrs. Peralta on Dalton Road. She's 84, her nearest neighbor is 6 miles away, and her children don't visit. I bring the kit, the oxygen, whatever they need. I don't charge them, and I don't file paperwork." Claire stopped reading. 20 years. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Every single week. She looked at the 3 journals sitting on the stretcher platform, picked up the first one, and opened it to a random page. October 14th. Drove to the orchard camp off Mill Creek. Treated a man named Hector deep laceration on his forearm work injury from a pruning saw. Irrigated closed with butterfly strips tetanus from my supply. His daughter, maybe 6, watched the whole time and didn't flinch. Tough kid. Left extra bandages. Will follow up Thursday. She turned to another page. January 9th. Route 9 overpass. Checked on Dale. Cough is worse. Told him he needs a chest x-ray, but he won't go near a hospital. Gave him my last azithromycin samples. Also treated a woman named Sandra frostbitten toes. She had no socks. I gave her mine and drove home barefoot. Then a line at the bottom that hit her like a wall. Julia would have laughed at that. Julia, Claire's mother, dead 11 years from breast cancer. Page after page after page. Hundreds of entries. Over 20 years. Each one dated. Each one specific. Names, ailments, treatments, follow-ups. A teenager whose parents kicked her out. Tom drove her to a shelter and checked on her twice a week for a month. A farm worker with 2 broken fingers taped with electrical tape. Tom reset them, splinted them, came back 3 days later. An old man under the overpass with a septic wound Tom cleaned and packed it every other day for 2 weeks. Her father had been running a one-man clinic out of this ambulance for 2 decades, and nobody knew. She went back to the letter. The building on Greer Street is mine. Paid cash from this account. I've been fixing it up, new plumbing, some electrical. It's not much yet, but it could be a clinic. A real one. No insurance required. No paperwork, no questions asked. Just a place where people can walk in and get help. Then this. I know you left nursing. Your brother told me why, though you never did. I'm not going to pretend I understand what you went through because I don't. But I know what it feels like to lose someone you were supposed to save. I've carried that weight for 30 years. The trick isn't to stop carrying it. The trick is to keep moving while you do. Claire, I'm asking you to finish what I started. The building, the money, the ambulance, they're all yours. I put the property in a trust so Derek can't touch it. Ellison and Parker have the documents. This was always meant for you. The journals are the proof. Every patient, every visit, every life I tried to help. Read them when you're ready. And when you're ready, open the doors and keep going. The last lines were the ones that broke her. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry I wasn't better at saying either one while I was still around to say it. Dad. Claire set the letter down on her lap. She was crying. She didn't try to stop. The ambulance was cold and quiet around her, still smelling of antiseptic and vinyl and her father. Outside, the scrapyard had been open for 15 minutes. She didn't care. She picked up the second journal and opened it to the first page. And she began to read the careful handwriting of a man she thought she knew. A man who went to work and came home tired. A man she never once asked what tired him out. By 9:15, she was still in the back of the ambulance, surrounded by her father's secrets, reading about strangers she'd never met and a life he'd quietly held together for 20 years. She didn't call the scrapyard. She didn't call the tow company. She sat in the vehicle her brother called scrap metal, and for the first time in 7 months, she felt something other than numb. Claire set the journals aside and reached for the bundle of letters. The rubber band snapped the moment she pulled it. Envelopes scattered across the stretcher platform. She picked up the nearest one. Lined notebook paper inside folded into thirds. Slow, careful handwriting, every letter drawn separately. Dear Mr. Tom, you helped my daughter Sophia when she had the bad cough. The doctor said pneumonia in her lungs. You came to our house 2 times and brought the medicine and listened to her breathing. She is better now and started school again. I don't have money to pay you, but I made tamales and left them at the church. You are a good man. God sees what you do. The next one, typed on clean white paper. Different voice, different story. Same man. Mr. Hadley, you probably don't remember me, but one November you drove me 40 miles to the VA hospital at 3 in the morning after I called the crisis line and nobody came. You stayed in the waiting room until someone took me back. You didn't know me. You didn't ask questions. You just drove. I'm writing because I'm still here, and I wanted you to know that mattered. Another, written on the back of a gas station receipt. 3 lines. You checked on me every Thursday for 2 years after my husband died. Nobody else did. Thank you. And one more in a child's handwriting. Mr. Tom, you fixed my arm and it doesn't hurt anymore. Thank you. Below the words, a crayon drawing. A stick figure in red standing next to a white rectangle on wheels. Claire read 12 letters before she had to stop. 12 strangers. 12 lives her father had quietly held together. A veteran he drove 40 miles at 3 in the morning. A widow he visited every Thursday for 2 years. A little girl whose pneumonia he treated and whose mother paid him in tamales left at a church. 20 more letters sat unopened in the pile. 20 more lives, she hadn't met yet, and he never said a word about any of it. She pulled out her phone and typed the address from the deed. The map placed it on the east side of town, past the tire shops and the dollar store, in a stretch she'd driven through 100 times without stopping. She gathered everything: journals, letters, passbook, legal documents. Put them into a canvas bag she found behind the driver's seat, one with Tom's initials written on the strap in permanent marker. She locked the ambulance, got in her mother's old sedan, and drove east. Greer Street was quiet for a Saturday morning. Low commercial buildings lined one side, a laundromat with a handwritten sign. A tax preparer's office closed for the season, a small auto repair shop with 2 bay doors open. 3 buildings from the corner that was the address. Brick front, plywood over the windows. A faded "For Lease" sign still taped inside the glass door. But the door itself was solid newer than the building around it. A small concrete lot to the right. Cracked, but recently swept. Her father owned this for 9 years. Drove here on weekends while she lived 30 minutes away. And she never once asked what he did with his days off. She got out. The key fit the deadbolt. She turned it and heard it slide. Hey! A man walking out of the repair shop across the street, wiping his hands on a rag. Late 50s stocky work shirt with the name Frank stitched above the pocket. You're Tom's daughter. Not a question. Claire, I'm Frank Gutierrez. Your dad and I go back a long time. How did you know him? Frank stopped a few feet away. His face went serious. Your father saved my life. He told the story. Construction on the overpass outside town. July, 102 degrees. Frank went down in the dirt, and his heart quit. Tom wasn't even on shift, driving past in the ambulance headed to the camps. Saw the crew flagging him down. Pulled over and started compressions. Kept Frank's heart going for 11 minutes until the county unit arrived. He never told us, Claire said. That wasn't Tom. Frank shook his head. After that, he started coming by the shop. Not for car work for my crew. Cuts, sprains, broken fingers. Couldn't afford the ER. Your dad treated them in my shop after hours. Stitched a man's forearm on my workbench once. I've still got the stain in the wood. How long did that go on? Right up until he couldn't drive anymore. Frank paused. Last time I saw him was about a month before he passed. He drove the ambulance here, parked it right where your car is now. Went inside for 20 minutes, came to my shop, handed me the keys to the rig, and asked me to keep it running. You've been maintaining the ambulance, Claire said. Every 2 weeks. Oil, battery, fluids, tires. When I heard he died, Frank's voice dropped, I did one last full service. Didn't know who'd come for it. Just knew I owed him that. Your father saved more lives off the clock than most paramedics save on it, Frank said quietly. And he never wanted a single person to know. She pushed the door open. Frank followed her inside. One fluorescent tube buzzed overhead. Open floor plan. Exposed brick. Concrete floor. A rough reception counter along the left wall, plywood and 2x4s, but level and square. Behind it, 2 smaller spaces, separated by a half-finished wall. Plumbing roughed in. Capped pipes where a sink would go. Electrical panel new. 60 amps. Clean wiring. Labeled breakers. In the far corner, a storage closet with a padlock. 3rd key fit. Inside, a blood pressure cuff still in its packaging. Exam gloves. Gauze and surgical tape. A stethoscope mid-grade, the kind Claire herself would have picked for a general practice clinic. On the upper shelf, a folder. Building codes for medical facilities. County permit applications, blank but organized. And a handwritten checklist in Tom's script. Exam room 80 square feet minimum. Waiting area 6 chairs. Accessible entrance, 36 inches clearance. Hands-free faucet at sink. He had planned this down to the square foot. He told me once, Frank said from the doorway, that the worst part of being a paramedic wasn't the emergencies, it was the drive home. He'd treat somebody at the camps or under the overpass, and the whole way home he'd wonder if they were going to be okay, because they didn't have anywhere else to go after he left. A free clinic for people with nowhere else to go. That's what Tom Hadley was building while his family thought he was just a tired old paramedic who fell asleep in front of the TV. Then Claire's phone rang. Derek. "I got a piece of Dad's forwarded mail," he said. "Property tax notice. Commercial building on the east side. You know anything about that?" "It's Dad's." "That's exactly my point. It's part of the estate. Should have been included in the valuation." "You already divided the estate, Derek." "I divided what we knew about. If Dad was hiding assets, that changes things." "He wasn't hiding anything. He was building something." "Building what?" "A clinic. A free clinic." Silence. Then a short, dry laugh. "A free clinic? Dad made 42 grand a year. He wasn't building clinics. And yet, I'm standing inside one." "We need to sit down with an attorney. This is estate property." He already sat down with an attorney. "The property's in a trust. Ellison and Parker. You're welcome to call them." His voice went flat. "A trust. What kind of trust? The kind that does exactly what Dad wanted." Claire Dad wasn't thinking clearly toward the end. Secret bank accounts. Buying buildings. None of this is rational. And that's when Claire said something she'd been holding in since the day of the funeral. "You took the house. You took the savings. You took the truck. You sold Dad's tools to a pawn shop before I even knew they were gone. Then you handed me the keys to an ambulance you called scrap metal and 3 boxes of what you said was worthless." She paused. Let the silence sit. "What else do you want, Derek?" He didn't answer right away. She could hear him breathing. "We're not done with this," he said. "Yeah," Claire said. "We are." She hung up. Her hand was steady. The words had come out calm and direct, the voice she used to use in the hospital when a situation needed someone to stop reacting and start thinking. She hadn't heard that voice in 7 months. Frank was leaning against the counter, giving her space. He waited a beat after the call ended, then looked up. "Your dad picked the right person," he said quietly. Before she left, Frank told her one more thing. "There's someone you should meet. Estelle Marsh runs the food pantry at the church on Cedar. Your dad spent every Tuesday and Thursday there for over 20 years. She knew what he was doing better than anyone." The church was a small brick building with a sloped roof. Below the sign, Food Pantry Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was Saturday, but the basement entrance was propped open. Claire went down the steps into a long room, folding tables, shelves lined with canned goods. At the far end, a woman in her 70s standing at a desk with a clipboard, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain. "Are you Estelle Marsh?" "Depends who's asking." "I'm Claire Hadley, Tom's daughter." Estelle set the clipboard down, studied Claire's face for a long moment. Then she came around the desk, took Claire by the arm, and guided her to a chair. "Sit down. I've been wondering when one of you would show up. You knew. About the ambulance, about what he was doing." "Sweetheart, I knew all of it." Estelle told her everything. Tom came every Tuesday and Thursday, parked the ambulance out back, set up at a folding table near the kitchen, treated anyone who walked through the door, blood pressure, wound care, flu symptoms, ear infections. Never charged a cent. Never turned a single person away. 15-20 people some days, mothers with sick kids. Old folks who couldn't get to a doctor. farm workers with no insurance. Estelle walked her to a corkboard on the far wall, covered with photographs. In every single one, Tom was in the background, working, never looking at the camera. He never wanted to be in the photos, Estelle said. I had to catch him when he wasn't looking. He talked about you, Estelle added. Said you had your mother's stubbornness and his instinct for people. He also said you were hurting, that you'd left nursing after something happened. She paused. He didn't push. That wasn't his way. He just said he believed you'd come back when you were ready. Then people started showing up. Not for the pantry, for Claire. Rosa came first, 24, holding a toddler on her hip. 3 years ago, her baby came 6 weeks early, at the camp past Mill Creek. No car, no phone. Tom delivered the baby on the floor of the rig, kept the child breathing, drove them both to the hospital. The doctors said the first 20 minutes made the difference. Your father was the first 20 minutes, Rosa said. After her, Walter, a farmer whose wife was bitten by a rattlesnake. 40 minutes from the nearest ER. Tom arrived in 12 minutes, treated the bite, kept her stable, followed the ambulance all the way to the hospital. My wife is alive because of your father, Walter said. I tried to pay him. He told me to put it in the pantry jar instead. After Rosa and Walter, more came. A woman whose son Tom talked off a ledge at 3 in the morning. A grandmother whose insulin Tom drove 30 miles to pick up when her ride fell through. They kept coming, one after another, strangers walking into a basement, to tell Claire about a father she never knew. They didn't come with speeches. They came with facts, dates, names, the kind of details you don't forget when someone saves your life. Somewhere between the 3rd story and the 10th, something inside Claire shifted. Not all at once. More like a crack in a wall she'd built 7 months ago, just wide enough to let the light in. Estelle walked over when the last person left and put a hand on Claire's arm. Some people build monuments, she said. Your father built trust. It's harder to see, but it lasts longer. Claire drove home with the canvas bag on the passenger seat. 3 journals, 30 letters, a passbook, a deed, and a letter from a dead man asking his daughter to finish what he started. She wasn't ready. She knew that. But for the first time in 7 months, she wasn't sure she wanted to stay where she was either. If you're still here, drop a comment. Tell me, do you think Claire should open that clinic? Or is Derek right that none of this makes sense? Because what's coming next is the part that changed my mind about this entire story. Stay with me. Claire called Frank the next morning. I need help. I don't know teachers. I don't know where to start. I do, Frank said. I'll bring my tools. He showed up before noon with a pickup truck full of equipment and 2 men from his crew. They walked the building together. Frank checked the plumbing, tested the electrical, inspected the foundation. Your dad did solid work, he said. Bones are good. We need to finish the walls, install the sink, get a bathroom in that back corner, and run the last stretch of wiring. I can do most of it. I can't pay you, Claire said. I didn't ask you to. Estelle came by that afternoon with a list. She'd called everyone in the pantry network. A retired electrician who owed Tom for years of free blood pressure checks. A plumber whose granddaughter Tom treated for bronchitis. A woman at the county permit office who knew how to move applications along. Your father helped these people, Estelle said. They want to help back. Let them. And they did. Within a week, the building started changing. Interior walls went up. The bathroom took shape. Frank's crew connected the plumbing and mounted the sink. The electrician finished the wiring. Outlets went in where exam rooms would go. Claire swept, cleaned, painted, hauled drywall, carried scrap to the dumpster. She worked in that building from morning until dark, and at night in her apartment she read the journals. She'd finished the second and third. She went back to the first reading entries she'd skimmed too quickly in the ambulance, finding details she'd missed, names that matched people she was meeting now. Follow-up notes showing Tom returning week after week to check on someone the rest of the world had already forgotten. Then on a Thursday night, she found it. Near the back of the first journal, different ink, darker, the handwriting shakier than the rest. Tom must have added this entry late, well after the others. The date was 7 months ago. Claire's hands went still. Claire called tonight. She sounds tired. I can hear it in her voice, the way she trails off mid-sentence and then catches herself. She lost a patient and she blames herself. She won't say it, but I know. Claire stopped breathing. I've carried the same weight for 30 years. A woman named Grace, 41 years old. Cardiac arrest on a highway shoulder. I got there in time, but my hands weren't fast enough. I think about her every year on the anniversary. She had never told him about Danny. Not once. She never called her father to say what happened because she couldn't bear the idea of him knowing his daughter had failed at the work he'd spent his entire life doing. But he knew. He heard it in her voice, the way fathers hear the things their children think they're hiding. The next lines broke her open. Claire won't stay away forever. She's too much like her mother to stay away from people who need help. When she comes back, maybe she'll find what I've been building. Maybe she'll understand why I never stopped. He knew about Danny. He knew she was hiding. He knew she was ashamed. And instead of calling her, instead of pushing, instead of offering advice she wasn't ready to hear, he wrote it down in a journal she was only ever meant to find if she came looking. He didn't respond with words. He responded with lumber and pipe and a building permit. The tears came then, not the quiet ones from the ambulance that blurred the letters. These were different, harder, deeper, pulled from somewhere she'd kept sealed shut for 7 months. She cried for Tom, for the visits she didn't make, for the phone calls she cut short, because she told herself she was too tired, when the truth was, she was too ashamed. She cried for the conversations she never started, the questions she never asked. And the man who knew his daughter was drowning, and instead of reaching in with words, he built her a life raft out of brick and concrete, and 20 years of proof that the work was worth doing. She sat at her kitchen table until the crying stopped. Then she sat there longer. The quiet apartment, the unpaid bills, the scrubs in the closet, the license in the drawer. She didn't move. She just let it pass through her. The next morning, she drove back to the building. Frank was at the counter sanding the surface smooth. Estelle was in the closet organizing supplies into labeled bins, and a young woman Claire had never seen was standing in the doorway, hands in the pockets of a county EMS jacket, looking at the half-finished room with an expression Claire couldn't quite read. "Can I help you?" Claire said. "My dad sent me." She nodded toward Frank. "Said you might need an extra set of hands." "You're Frank's daughter." "Lily." She held out her hand. "He told me about the clinic, about what your dad was building." "Did he tell you everything?" Lily looked at the walls, the labeled cabinets, the supplies on the counter. Then she looked back at Claire, and her expression settled into something Claire recognized. The look of someone who just learned something about their own story that changes the shape of it. "He told me your father was the one who delivered me," Lily said. Claire went still. 24 years ago, winter storm, roads closed. My mom was in labor and my dad was panicking. A paramedic drove through the snow in an ambulance and delivered me in my parents' kitchen. She paused. I grew up hearing the story, but nobody ever used a name. It was always just the paramedic. Dad didn't learn the name until years later. Lily looked at the building around her. He was there the night I was born, and I never even knew his name. She said it plainly, still absorbing it. I'm training to be an EMT, she said. If you need help getting the clinic ready, I want to be part of it. We need all the help we can get, Claire said. Lily started that afternoon. She organized the exam rooms with the precision of someone trained in emergency protocols. Labeled every cabinet. Drew up an inventory. Taped a supply checklist inside the closet door. And when she found Tom's handwritten planning notes on the shelf, she read them carefully, then set them back exactly where they'd been. 4 people now. Claire, Frank, Estelle, Lily, building what one man started and didn't live long enough to finish. The lawyer's letter arrived on Friday morning. Derek's attorney was challenging the trust on grounds of diminished capacity. The filing cited Tom's secretive financial behavior and failure to disclose assets as evidence that he was not of sound mind when the trust was created. In plain language, Derek was saying their father was losing his mind, that the secret account, the building, the ambulance, the 20 years of hidden work, all of it was proof that Tom Hadley didn't know what he was doing. Claire set the letter down without speaking. Frank saw her face and walked over. What happened? Derek filed a challenge, says Dad was incompetent. Frank went to his truck and came back with a cardboard box. Inside his maintenance records for the ambulance, every service visit, dated, signed by Tom, oil changes, tire rotations, fluid checks, and on each record, a note in Tom's handwriting about where he planned to go next, which camp, which patient needed a follow-up. Your father wrote these himself, Frank said. Clear handwriting, specific details, every single time. Bring them to the hearing. Estelle brought her own file, pantry sign-in sheets showing Tom's attendance week after week, photographs with dates on the back, signed statements from 3 volunteers who worked beside him every Tuesday. The attorney from Ellison and Parker submitted Tom's medical records, annual physicals, blood work, cognitive assessments, all normal. The final checkup, 10 weeks before he died, documented him as alert-oriented and fully competent. 7 years of annual trust reviews, each one showing a man who was organized, specific, and intentional. Derek wanted to call his father incompetent. The evidence said otherwise. The hearing was on a Tuesday afternoon. County courthouse. Small room, 2 tables, a bench, 6 rows of chairs. Claire sat at the left table with her attorney. Derek sat at the right with his. Sharon was behind him in the first row, arms crossed, expression flat. Claire turned and looked at the back of the room. It was full. Rosa was there with her toddler asleep on her lap. Walter, the farmer, and his wife. Estelle, upright, hands folded. Frank in a clean shirt. Lily beside him. 2 women from the pantry. An older man Claire didn't recognize. A woman in scrubs who must have come straight from a shift. People Claire had never met. People who came because they heard what was happening and wanted to be in the room. Derek's attorney went first. Secretive behavior. Undisclosed assets. Financial decisions inconsistent with a man earning $42,000 a year. A pattern, he said, of irrational decision-making, pointing to cognitive decline. It sounded clean, almost convincing, if you didn't know the man they were talking about. Claire's attorney responded with evidence, medical records, maintenance logs, pantry attendance records, photographs, 7 years of trust reviews. Then the judge allowed statements from the gallery. Walter went first. Stood slowly. 70 years old, weathered hands, voice like gravel. He described the night his wife was bitten by the rattlesnake. How Tom arrived in 12 minutes. Treated the bite. kept her stable for the 40-minute drive to the hospital. "My wife is alive because of that man," Walter said. "And you want to call him incompetent. He was the most competent person I ever met, and he didn't charge me a dime." Rosa spoke next. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. She described her baby coming early at the camp, Tom delivering the child on the floor of the rig, the doctors telling her the first 20 minutes saved her daughter's life. She held her toddler a little tighter. "This man delivered my baby and kept her alive with his bare hands." Does that sound like someone who didn't know what he was doing? An older man stood. Tom had treated chronic wounds on his legs for 3 years, driving to his house every single week because he couldn't walk to a clinic. One by one they stood. A woman whose son Tom talked through a crisis at 3 in the morning. A man whose broken ribs Tom taped and monitored for 6 weeks. A grandmother whose insulin Tom picked up from a pharmacy 30 miles away. Nobody talked about the trust. Nobody used legal language. They talked about a man who showed up on their worst days and never asked for anything back. Derek sat through all of it. He didn't speak, didn't look at his attorney, didn't look at Sharon. He watched, face after face, story after story, a version of his father he had never seen. The judge reviewed the evidence. Trust was valid. Claire was the sole trustee. Challenge dismissed. Case closed. Derek's attorney collected his files and left. Sharon stood and moved toward the door, car keys already out. But at the threshold, she stopped. She looked back at the room, at the faces, at Rosa holding her daughter, at the old farmer with his weathered hands. Something crossed her expression. Not guilt exactly, more like the sudden awareness of being in a room full of people who understood something she didn't. Then she turned and walked out. Derek stayed in his chair. Then he stood and walked toward the back of the room, past the rows of people who had come for Tom. As he passed the end of Claire's row, he slowed. Their eyes met. His jaw was set. His face was tight. But underneath, Claire saw something she hadn't seen before. A crack. The first hairline fracture in the certainty he'd carried since the day after the funeral. Then he pushed through the door and was gone. Claire watched him cross the parking lot. Sharon was already in the passenger seat. Derek stood by the driver's door for a long moment, one hand on the roof, looking at nothing. Then he got in and drove south. Later that afternoon, her phone rang. A woman's voice, professional and calm. "Ms. Hadley, I'm with Ellison and Parker. I was your father's attorney. Your father established an irrevocable trust 7 years ago. You are the sole trustee. The property is designated specifically for community health services. The trust cannot be dissolved, sold, or redirected without trustee consent, and the terms were drafted to withstand exactly the kind of challenge your brother just attempted." "He planned for this," Claire said. "All of it. Your father visited our office once a year for 7 years. His final visit was 8 weeks before he passed. He was lucid, organized, and very specific about what he wanted." A pause. "He also left a note in the file." Claire closed her eyes. "It said, 'She'll be scared. Tell her that's normal.'" She sat alone in the building after everyone left. The fluorescent tube buzzed. The stripe of light on the floor had moved since the last time she stood here. She had a building her father wired and plumbed by hand. $43,000. 3 journals full of names she was still learning. A community that filled a courtroom for a man who never asked anyone to show up for him. And she had Danny Marsh. 4 minutes she couldn't get back. 7 months of silence. A license under takeout menus in a drawer she hadn't opened since the day she walked out of St. Luke's. Her father's note. She'll be scared. Tell her that's normal. He knew her, even from the other side of whatever distance she'd built between them. He knew exactly who she was and exactly what she'd feel standing in this room. Claire walked to the storage closet, opened it, picked up the stethoscope still sealed in its plastic case, turned it over in her hands. The weight was familiar. Everything about it was familiar. She held it for a long time, standing in the room her father built for her. Terrified. Still, and not leaving. 3 months later. Spring. The building on Greer Street didn't look the same anymore. Fresh paint, pale blue with white trim. Glass windows where plywood used to be. Morning light pouring across the waiting room floor. Walls finished. Exam rooms complete. Bathroom tiled and functional. Frank built the reception desk himself. Reclaimed barn wood, sanded and sealed until the grain showed through. Estelle donated 6 chairs for the waiting room, mismatched but sturdy. Lily stocked every cabinet from tongue depressors to blood pressure cuffs. The ambulance sat in the parking lot. Cleaned, polished. One final service from Frank. The paint still showed its age, but the chrome was bright, and the engine turned over on the first try. Claire renewed her nursing license in March. Studied at her kitchen table, Tom's journals stacked beside her textbooks. Took the exam on a Wednesday morning. Passed. When the envelope came from the state board, she sat in her car in the post office parking lot and held it in her lap for a long time. Then she drove to the building and taped it to the wall behind the reception desk next to a framed photograph of Tom that Estelle had pulled from the pantry corkboard. The one where he was checking a patient's blood pressure in the background, not looking at the camera. The sign went up on a Saturday. Frank and 2 of his crew bolted it above the new glass door. White letters on a blue background. Hadley Community Health Clinic. Walk-ins, welcome. No one turned away. Claire stood on the sidewalk and looked up at it. Her father's name on a building he bought with money nobody knew about. Built with his own hands on weekends, nobody noticed for people nobody else was helping. She stayed there until her eyes burned. Then she went inside to get ready for Monday. Opening morning was warm and clear. Frank arrived before 7. Estelle came next with a coffee urn and pastries. Lily was already inside running her supply checklist. By 9 o'clock, the waiting room had people in it. Rosa, with her daughter, walking now. Walter and his wife near the window. 2 women from the pantry. Frank's crew stopping in to shake Claire's hand. The older couple from the hearing sitting in the corner holding hands. They hadn't come because they were sick. They came because this place existed, and they wanted to be there when it opened. Claire stood behind the reception desk and felt something shift in her chest. Something locked tight for months, slowly letting go. Then Derek walked in. Jacket, no tie, hands at his sides. Sharon was not with him. Claire came out from behind the desk. The room went quiet. "Can we talk?" he said. She walked past him through the front door. He followed. They stopped beside the ambulance. Morning sun warm on the old metal. For a moment, neither spoke. "I sat in that hearing," Derek said, "listened to every single one of those people, and I realized something I should have figured out a long time ago." He paused. "I didn't know him." Claire waited. "I thought I did. I knew a man who went to work and came home tired. I never once asked what tired him out." He looked at the clinic. "He built all of this, spent 20 years helping people I'll never meet, and he kept it from us because he knew exactly what I would have said." His voice was steady, but the steadiness was costing him. He was right. I would have called it a waste. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a white envelope. I sold the house for $260. My share after mortgage and costs was about $24,000. He held the envelope out. This is half. Inside a check for $12,000, made out to the Hadley Community Health Clinic. It's not enough, Derek said. I know that. But it's a start. She looked at the check, then at her brother. He wasn't the man who dangled the ambulance keys over the counter 3 months ago. He wasn't entirely someone else either. He was a man standing in a parking lot trying to do something he didn't have a script for, and it was costing him every ounce of certainty he normally carried. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. They didn't hug. That would come later or it wouldn't. But he was here, and for now, that was enough. He walked to his car. This time Claire didn't wonder if he was coming back. Inside, the waiting room had settled into a warm hum. Frank adjusting a cabinet hinge. Lily restocking gloves. Estelle sitting with Walter's wife laughing about something. Then the front door opened. A woman walked in carrying a small boy against her shoulder. Maybe 2 years old. Cheeks flushed and damp. The woman's eyes were wide and tired, the face of someone who'd been up since 3 in the morning. "Is this the clinic?" she said. "A woman at the laundromat told me about it. She said you don't turn people away." "That's right," Claire said. "Come on in." She brought them to the first exam room. Washed her hands at the sink. Tom's plumbing had roughed in the one Frank connected. Pulled out a thermometer. "How long has the fever been going?" "Since yesterday afternoon. We gave him Tylenol, but it keeps coming back. He won't eat. 102.4. "I'm going to listen to his chest," Claire said. She took the stethoscope from the counter, the one Tom bought and stored in the supply closet, still sealed in plastic until a week ago, when Claire opened it and fitted the earpieces for the first time. She placed the bell against the boy's back. For a split second she was back in that room. Danny's face, Danny's eyes. "I can't breathe." The grip going slack. Then the boy squirmed against his mother's neck, alive, fussy, fighting the cold metal on his skin. And Claire exhaled. Clear breath sounds. No crackle. No wheeze. She checked his ears, his throat. Pressed gently on his abdomen. Viral fever, not dangerous, but worth monitoring. Mild dehydration. She showed the mother how to check, pressing the skin on the back of the boy's hand, watching how quickly it flattened. The same technique Tom taught a mother at the camps 20 years ago, written in the second journal, 3rd page. She gave the woman a bottle of children's electrolyte solution and clear instructions. "Come back in 2 days if the fever doesn't break. No charge. That's what we're here for." The woman's eyes filled. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't know where else to go." "You're in the right place," Claire said. She watched them cross the parking lot to a sedan with a cracked taillight and a car seat in the back. Late afternoon. Waiting room empty. Claire walked outside and leaned against the ambulance. The sun was low. The air smelled like warm pavement and the first cut grass of spring. She reached down and opened the steel compartment under the stretcher mount. Empty. The journals were on a shelf in her apartment. The letters in a box at the reception desk. The passbook at the bank. The deed filed with the trust. Everything that had been sealed in the dark was out in the open now. Turned into drywall and wiring and a sign that said, "No one would be turned away." She closed the compartment, rested her hand on the ambulance, the faded paint, the rusted wheel wells, the cracked mirror held on with electrical tape. The vehicle her brother called scrap metal. The vehicle her father called a beginning. Tom Hadley spent his life showing up for people nobody else showed up for. He did it quietly. without recognition, without telling a soul. And when he couldn't do it anymore, he left everything behind so the work would continue. He didn't leave Claire money. He didn't leave her a house. He left her a reason to come back. Danny Marsh was 4 minutes she could never get back. But every patient who walked through that door, every mother, every child, every person who had nowhere else to go, was a set of minutes she could still give. And she did. The ambulance sat in the parking lot, old, rusted, and still running. Through the clinic window, Lily was wiping down the exam table. Frank was tightening something in the back room. Estelle pulled in with a crate of food for the break room fridge. Claire looked at all of it, the building, the people, the name on the sign. Then she went back inside. There was work to do tomorrow, and the day after. And every day after that, the doors were open now. She was ready. And that is the end of this story. But it doesn't have to be the end of yours. If someone in your life is carrying a weight they think they have to carry alone, call them. Don't wait. Don't assume they know. Because Tom Hadley loved his daughter every single day, and never once said it out loud until he wrote it in a letter she almost never found. If this story meant something to you, share it. Subscribe, and leave a comment telling me what would you have done if you found that compartment. I'll see you in the next one.